All right, good afternoon. Thank you all for being here today. What makes these events truly special is your attendance and participation. As we can see, a very nice turnout today. Also want to say thank you to those who are joining us on YouTube or via Ripon College Live events. And for those of you who are visiting Ripon College, welcome to the college. And I'm Henrik Schatzinger. I'm the co-director of the Center for Politics and the People, along with my colleague, Dr. Brian Smith. This event is not only sponsored by the CPP, but also by the Psychology Department and two honor societies, Psychi, the International Honor Society in Psychology, as well as Pi Sigma Alpha, the National Political Science Honor Society. So I want to thank all of them for organizing this event today. Today we are here to discuss how unconscious thought influences political understanding and attitudes. In other words, we will explore how personality traits affect our understanding of and attitude towards government action. And we want to have a special focus on who gets help and who does not. To discuss this topic, we will hear from Dr. Aaron Dusso, who is an associate professor of political science at Indiana University, Purdue University, Indianapolis, IUPUI. Dr. Dusso is also a core faculty member of Indiana University's Center for Civic Literacy. Last year, he published a book on today's topic entitled Personality and the Challenges of Democratic Governance, How Unconscious Thought Influences Political Understanding, published by Palgrave Macmillan. It is a great honor for me to introduce Dr. Dusso, as he is a very good friend of mine. Sort of the background is that we were both finishing our PhD and we were working as policy analysts in Washington, D.C. in a small think tank called the Campaign Finance Institute. So we were working very close together on campaign finance reform projects. And in fact, we spent many lunch breaks and on the commute back home we discussed all kinds of interesting issues. And we've also published together, and we are currently working on two projects, one of which we will present in Chicago in April. In fact, we just had a meeting with our student assistants who are helping us in this endeavor. In terms of his educational background, Dr. Dusso has a bachelor's degree in political science from Michigan University, a master's degree in social science from the University of Chicago, and a PhD in political science from George Washington University. His research focus is on the intersection of political psychology and citizen knowledge and engagement. But he has also published work on interest groups, political parties, and elections. Some of the outlets he has published in are peer-reviewed journals such as Electoral Studies, Political Behavior, Political Research Quarterly, and Social Science Quarterly. After the talk, which will be about 30-35 minutes, we will have plenty of time for you to ask questions. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Dusso.
Thank you very much. I want to thank Ripon College for inviting me and Professor Schatzinger for bringing me here. I've known Henry for a long time, about a decade, I guess, at this point. And it's great to be out here. I am historically Wisconsinite, and most of my family's roots are here in Wisconsin. My parents are from Rosendale, not too far away from here, obviously, and Oconto. I've been there many times. So it's good to be back in Wisconsin and to see everyone here and see the great campus here at Ripon College. It's great. So thank you very much for having me here. And you had me here to talk about my favorite subject in the world, which is our democracy and its people, and how good or not quite so good at being democratic citizens, with a particular focus on the mind and the brain and what might cause us to be better or worse at living up to the ideals of a democratic citizen that might not be necessarily under our control. And as you can see in my title of my book, personality becomes this thing that I'm going to point to a lot And the question of personalities, oftentimes, is not something that we think about that we're really under control ourselves. Not that that we can decide one day that I've been an introvert my entire life. Now I'm tired of that. I'm going to be an extrovert now. So a lot of the things that might drive our behavior that are connected to personality oftentimes aren't stuff that's under our control. And so what I've been wondering, and what drove my decision to do research in this area is, okay, so if this is under control, how does that affect our civic aptitude, our ability to engage in the political world? And so I want to start off with one of my favorite quotes here, which is from Joseph Schumpeter. And he says that the typical citizen drops down to a lower level of mental performance as soon as he enters the political field. He argues and analyzes in a way which he would readily recognize as infantile within the sphere of his real interests. He becomes a primitive again. I like this quote for several reasons because I'm guessing since you all are here, you're all interested in politics, you pay attention and you're watching TV and that, and you probably notice that a lot of people talk about, well, people today. People, the citizens today were not as good, right? Or the generation, millennials, what's wrong with them? That, our democracy is failing because of people today. And I want to, point out something really important here. This is 1950 when he's writing this. 1950, so back when America was great, he's saying not necessarily so great. Because, one of the big points that I've made over and over, a lot of things I write for various publications, and when I talk to, in Indianapolis, occasionally we'll get some media will comment, wants to comment on various things. One of the things I want to point out all the time is that people aren't that different. We're not really much different at all. If you look back in the history of political science, research that has tried to find, how good are people at being democratic citizens? How do they engage with politics? Well, after World War II, some of the first kind of scientific attempts at measuring this kind of ability of the American people start to be performed in 1940s, 1950s. And the thing that they're finding is, what we all kind of already know, which is that, well, people don't really know a lot about the specific issues. They don't really know a lot about the candidates that they're going to vote for. Oftentimes we could predict how people are going to vote long before a campaign even starts. Which starts whole research agendas about, well, what's the point of a campaign if we already know how people are going to vote? So right away, as soon as scholars could begin to test some of the very ideas that political philosophy has discussed for centuries, right? So whether or not democracy is a viable way of running a government has been the focus of attention for centuries. Plato talks about this, and of course a lot of the debate that has occurred in these kind of areas has been all about, well, can people even do it? I mean, have you met the average person? Are we sure that they can actually do this type of thing? And a lot of philosophers said no, it can't work. It's not going to work. And so here we are with many centuries, a couple centuries of history with a democracy here in our country, and finally political science comes along after a couple centuries, mid 20th century, starts applying some of the scientific methods of understanding people, and starts finding that we can start testing some of these ideas about how well people can engage with the political world, and what we're finding is that they're maybe not so great at it. And so now, what my work is moving beyond that and kind of trying to figure out, well, how much of that is actually under our control, and how much of that essentially is going on in our heads and causing causes of this, or things that are perhaps in the unconscious mind as opposed to the conscious mind. So civic aptitude is a word I'm going to probably use a lot here, and what I mean by that is how well and how good we are at engaging in politics, understanding politics. So my focus becomes here something that's oftentimes not typically a focus of political scientists. Political scientists are big on focusing on why do people do what they do. And I'm not just interested in why you do what you do, or any other person does what, or why I do what I do. What I want to know is how good are they at doing it, right? Because democracy depends more on just people showing up. It depends more on people just talking on the radio. It depends more on people, not showing up, or filling out, participating on a march like this. It needs people to actively engage in this in a quality way. The quality of our participation matters a lot. I think there's a lot of concern today that our quality of our participation is not so great. And so I want to know, okay, well, what causes that? What causes quality of participation? And so this is kind of becomes the driving force behind a lot of my research here. So are people able to live up to the standards of the ideal democratic citizen? So the ideal democratic citizen that we're talking about here, coming out of political philosophy, a lot of folk theorems of how democracy is supposed to work here. Can people do that? And if our democracy depends on them, and they can't live up to that standard, what do we do? So what is an ideal democratic citizen? Well, there's not a formal definition of this, no matter what you look at. There's a lot of different ideas, but oftentimes, the demands that we might place on, the expectations that you, me, and every one of us are supposed to know, the knowledge we're supposed to have in order to actually engage in politics, might be, actually quite daunting if you sit and think about it. I mean, think about all of the political issues that, government at state level, local level, at the national level are dealing with, and how many of those issues do we actually have any real working knowledge on? Me, not even close to a good enough percentage. But it's seemingly democracy to work depends on its people, right? It's built on its people. But if they don't have this knowledge, what happens here? So, thinking about, ideal democratic citizens, do we understand public policy? All public policy, right? We're supposed to be voting on that. We're going to hold our representatives accountable based on what they've done with these public policies. But do we even know what the public policies are? Much less how they work, right? So we need to know how they work too. What would a bill that's being proposed in Congress or in the state legislature, what will it do? We need to know that, right? We're supposed to be able to judge that. Do we? Well, probably not. It's impossible, right? So, thinking about what do office holders have they done in office? We're running for re-election here. We're going to have an election here in November. Do we know what the the votes that have been cast by a member of Congress? Might know something, maybe. And yeah, even if I know their vote, do I know what the bill really was and what it does? Maybe. Oftentimes, I'm going to be outsourcing that material to some some simple cue that I'm going to use, right? So partisanship becomes one of the big cues that we use. Well, I don't need to know. I'm going to just vote my partisanship. Well, I don't know that there's a lot of political philosophy that suggests that. Yeah, just going following party identification is going to make your great democracy here. So the expectations, I think, that democracy depends on you, me, and us understanding of politics, seem to be quite high. And I'm not sure that it's really even possible for anyone to live up to these standards. So now this becomes, a concern. Think, okay, well, what causes us to be better or worse at these type of things? So impossible to know everything, of course. And so then I think, well, the standard of knowing everything about everything, of course, is ridiculously too high. But how about we simplify it? Can people do some of the most basic things? What if I ask, can people, simply vote for the candidate that best represents their interests? So there's been some research in political science about this, trying to figure out, well, did you vote for the right candidate? This seems like a very low bar for democracy. Did you vote for the right candidate? Okay, well, research. What researchers suggested here that depending on how you measure exactly what counts as a correct vote or not, somewhere between 20 and 30%, and this is just at the presidential level, have voted incorrectly. 20 and 30% of people vote for the candidate is not really the one that they would best represent their own interests. So all of a sudden, okay, now that's a lot. Seems like a lot to me. And of course, maybe you could flip that coin on its head and say, well, 70% of people can vote correctly. And so I guess you could try and make an argument for why that's not so bad, but I think democracy needs more, and we need to be higher than that. I want people to at least vote the right way. And I don't think that's a particularly high demand. And yet we have some research suggesting that, nope, that's not working so well. And of course, in the U.S., we have two political parties. We have two viable candidates who are running for president, so there's only two. So even if you just randomly choose it, you're going to be right half the time, right? And what this research is showing, well, if you have multi-parties, multiple candidates, it gets even worse. People cannot do this. And so you're talking, it goes up to even half of people might be voting incorrectly when you have more than two candidates. So all of this causes me great concern because of, well, what do I do if maybe people aren't willing or able to live up to this ideal or even fulfill one very basic thing like, do you vote for the right candidate? So where do I look for answers? And first thing is, I always kind of recoil in horror when I hear people, well-meaning people, but still, incorrect people, and that they're saying, well, the solution to this is education. I love education. My entire life has been dedicated to education. I've been a student at every level. Then my career is in education, and I'm 100% for it. You all have made a great choice by going to Ripon College and getting a degree. I think that's fantastic. But the problem when people point to education as a solution to our problems as a democracy is that, well, this is not new. It's not like someone thought this up a couple years ago. So, oh, well, you know what we need to do is just get some more educated people. This has been advocated for 50 to 60 years. People have been saying this exact same thing. If people are more educated, then we'll have a better, better citizens, better civic aptitude, and we'll have a better democracy. Well, the reality is in the United States, we are more educated now than we've ever been on average. More people graduate from high school, more people go on to college, more people get college degrees, more people get national. Every single level, everyone is doing more now than ever before. But are we better at being democratic citizens? I've not seen a measure that suggests that we are. We're staying. Staying. So this is, to me, then the answer for education is highly problematic just on that basis. But then there's also research into how well people who are highly educated do. And one of the scary things about this research is that you think, I'm sure you've all heard of fake news. Yeah, this is a buzzword now. And so some research had been done on some topics of dubious nature, and that became quite partisan. And what they found was that who the people are that are most likely to believe the dubious fact? The people who pay attention to politics the most. The most highly educated, most person who pays closest attention to politics, they're the ones that are most likely to believe and change their opinion based on the false fact. Why is this? Because if you're not paying attention, you don't hear the false fact. So people who are lower educated, they're not listening. It's not them that are making the change. They're not the ones that are causing, all of a sudden lots of large, proportion of Americans believe this false thing. It's the people who are educated and paying attention, who care the most, are the ones that seem to be making this, mistake. And so again, it's like, oh, that's not what I was hoping to see. I want to see people who are highly educated. The more educated you are, the less likely you're to fall for this. Nope. No, when it comes to partisanship, it seems like the people who are most educated, most interested, most partisan, they're the ones that are going to buy it the most. Fastest, quickest. They change their opinion the fastest. So, all right, well, if it's not education going to solve this, I'm not sure, what's going to solve it. And I think before I can answer what's going to solve it, I might give away the ending. I don't have an answer. What's going to solve it? If I did, I would be unique. But I don't have an answer. But I think before we can actually come to an answer, we need to understand really what the problem is. And what I mean by that is, why is it that people struggle to know, to accurately understand the world, accurately understand, public policy, accurately vote for the right party or the right candidate? Why? Why is that? So I don't think it's just about some education. And I think it has a lot to do with what's going on in here. The psychology of human behavior. I think it has a lot to do with that. And what I mean when I think about that, what I'm thinking about are all those unconscious drivers of our behavior. The things that cause us to think and feel and do the things that we didn't choose ourselves. We didn't consciously choose to do this. So that's, I'm thinking, well, that can cause us to go to one restaurant or another. Why we eat now rather than later? Something else is driving us. I'm not choosing it. And so, maybe that's happening in politics too. Maybe this is something when it comes to politics and when it comes to public policy understandings and understanding what government does at any level. Maybe a lot of this has to do with the psychology of the human brain here and the unconscious mind. Now, I'm not going to go and define unconscious mind. I don't have that kind of time. But what I focus on is personality. And why I focus on personality is because measuring what's going on in people's minds is hard. First of all, I don't have an fMRI machine where I can put a bunch of people in it and scan their brains and watch what happens in there. It costs a ridiculous amount of money, and I don't have access to that. So what I had to look for is how can I try and measure something that's kind of going on in the unconscious mind while actually being able to, say, do a survey and ask people other political questions. And so personality actually presents an interesting opportunity. Why? Because we can measure personality in a survey. So there's lots of different personality inventories that you can offer up, and you can ask people questions, and we get pretty good measures of people's personality, and there's evidence that a personality A is caused, caused perhaps by our genetics, by the structure of the, neuroscience is suggesting that the structure of our brain is actually has a big part, driver of this personality, and there's evidence to suggest that what our personality does to us and causes us to do is unconscious. That it's not, we don't, that the effects of the personality on our behavior happen in the unconscious, not the conscious mind. And so this is what, drove me to say, I can measure it, A, and then B, this is coming, ultimately, this is a measure of an unconscious, brain behavior that is, is measurable and in a survey, and all of a sudden, boom, I can actually do something with this. So I can ask political questions, I can ask, I can test people how good they are doing, answering questions, how good they are connecting their policy preferences to the right party. I can do all that, and I have a measure that suggests that that's probably coming from, their unconscious mind. And so that's what I do. So, what personality do I actually focus on here? I know there's gets some small words up here, but the big 5 personality traits are what I focus on. And those big 5 personality traits are extroversion. So that's like active, talkative, outgoing, energetic, social. And these traits are, of course, a spectrum, right? So it'd be extrovert on one side, introvert on the other. And agreeableness is another one of the personality traits. That means you're appreciative, forgiving, kind, sympathetic, modest. Conscientiousness is another one. It means you're efficient, organized, reliable, productive, dutiful. Neuroticism, otherwise known as emotional stability. In political science, we tend to use emotional stability rather than neuroticism, but those are both same idea, ultimately 2 different ends of the spectrum there. But if you're neurotic, that means you're tense, unstable, worrying, hostile, and openness, or openness to experience. Here means you're curious, imaginative, insightful, introspective, original kind of thinker. So what I do is you can measure this, asking a few questions in a survey, a few questions, 10 questions technically, 2 for each personality trait, and you get a decent measure of a person's personality, on each one of these particular traits. Then what I do is I want to ask, basic civic competencies. So how good are you at doing some of the most basic things, not complex things, not understanding how, exactly everything that was in the most recent tax bill. I don't know, there's a lot of stuff in there and I don't know all of it. There's no, only people who are experts in that area will know everything about that. That's not the standard I'm using. What I'm saying is some very basic, competencies. And so what I mean by that is, so do people know basic facts about a political issue? So just do we recognize what's really going on? So I asked several questions about different issue areas. So something like healthcare, energy production, same-sex marriage, food stamps, and drug testing welfare recipients. So all right, well here's some some questions that I'll ask, and so I know these would be hard, so I'll read them. But here are the questions that I actually ask here. So when it comes to drug testing welfare recipients, I ask, do you think people who receive some type of welfare assistance are more likely to abuse drugs than the average U.S. citizen? Now research has been done on this, and it says no. And of course, if you follow this issue in the press, you would know that several states have required anyone who is seeking welfare assistance to take a drug test, and what those states have all found is hardly anyone, at least that's being tested, is showing up as positive. So all evidence currently suggests that no, there's certainly not more, maybe there are less, but that's not what the other research has shown. And so the same. So correct answer, case would say no. Another question, members of which party are more likely to support requiring drug testing for people receiving welfare? Now, again, if you pay attention to politics, there's no question as to which parties favor this, so you should know this, right? So if we're going to be good democratic citizens, knowing which party seems to be part of it. And so the Republican Party is clearly the one that has been supporting drug testing welfare recipients. So the correct answer would be Republican. Health insurance. Do you get help paying for health insurance by either the state or federal government? And of course, this one, I'll get to later on in the second chapter, is, well, the reality is that almost everyone gets help paying for health insurance. So if you get your health insurance from your job, well, what you have there is untaxed income, right? So if the job, instead of giving you the health insurance, just gave you a pot of money, then said you got to go to the free market and go buy some health insurance, you would pay taxes on that money, that income. right? So instead of paying taxes on it, what I do is I get directly health insurance from my employer. Indiana University, I think last I saw it said it's like worth $18,000. So I don't pay taxes on $18,000 of my income. That's a government benefit, right? So the reality is that when it comes to health insurance, almost every one of us, almost, not 100%, almost every one of us gets some type of benefit from a government program. So the correct answer is yeah, I do get help. Same-sex marriage. In states where same-sex marriage is legal, can religious organizations like churches or synagogues legally refuse to marry same-sex couples? In this case, the answer is yes. Almost always either written into the actual statutes suggest that exempts religious organizations from marrying same-sex couples. But then courts have also, at the federal and state level, also found that religious organizations do not have to marry same-sex couples. So this is, if you want to get this answer right, you say, no, they do not have to marry a same-sex couple. Energy policy. Has U.S. Oil production gone up or down since President Obama took office? So I did this survey in July of 2014, so President Obama was still around. So has energy production gone up, U.S. energy production, since 2009 is basically the question, and the answer was yes, a resounding yes, it had gone up substantially. And so the answer in this case would be yes. And then some questions about food stamps here. About what percentage of federal food stamp benefits do you think go to individuals living in a household that have income from a job? So you get food stamps, but you do have income from a job. The answer was 42 to 43% of households getting food stamps had income from a job. And I was generous in this case. I gave it in order to judge whether or not someone was right or wrong, because knowing exact percentages is very challenging. And so I basically marked anyone wrong who was outside of a 38% to 48% range. So you get anywhere in there, you were considered right. About what percentage of federal food stamp benefits do you think go to individuals who are working age but do not work a paid job and are not living with children, elderly, or disabled individuals? So in this question, I was trying to get at the classic, this notion that it's just deadbeats are getting welfare. So trying to find what percentage? Well, about 14% of people who receive food stamps would be considered of working age and don't currently live with children, elderly, or disabled individuals. So maybe those are the people that we are always so concerned about getting welfare and taking advantage of the system. It's only 14%. So, how do we do? Got this right? Well, here's the incorrect, right? So when it comes to welfare recipients not being more or less likely to be on drugs than the average U.S. citizen, 40% got it wrong. Republicans more likely to support drug testing, only 27.3, so people did seem to know that a little bit better. One of the better responses. Get help paying for health insurance. In this case, 62.2% got it wrong. U.S. oil production had increased, 20% get it wrong. Religious organizations can refuse to marry same-sex couples. And this was the best answer people seem to know the most. It's 18.5%. And the percent of food stamp recipients in households with an income, 90% of people got that wrong. So not even within, 90% of people weren't even within 38 to 48%. And so basically we had no idea how many people who are getting food stamps actually have some income that they could report. And then the percentage of food stamp recipients not living with a dependent, capable of working but do not earn an income, was 83% got that wrong. So we don't, so here it is, basic ideas. What's going on here? Do people at least understand some basic facts about public policy? And so when it comes to our personality traits, what seems to matter? Well, openness to experience was a good one. So the more open to experience you are, the more likely you are to get these questions right. Right, open. So if you're open to experience, good job. Bad news, extroverts. This is extroverts really don't do well in my book. Extroverts seem to struggle at this. So the more extroverted you are, the more likely you get this wrong. I'm still trying to figure out what's going on with extroverts. I want to dive into the extrovert world. As I've always been an introvert myself, so this is perfect fine for me. Yes, finally, I knew it. I knew being an introvert was better. So right now it seems that extroverts aren't doing so well. They're more likely to get it wrong. So this is one way. So this is the first way, democratic competency. Just do you know some facts? And here's another one that I think is, essentially the most basic thing we can expect from people as democratic citizens. Can you take your subjective opinion? You can believe anything you want. Anything you want. Doesn't matter. You can believe anything you want. But can you at least connect that opinion, whatever it is, to the right party? To me, this is about the lowest standard you could possibly have for a democratic citizen. Anything you want, you believe. I'm not telling you you're thinking wrong, and this is not me standing up in my ivory tower judging you whether or not you're thinking the right thing. It is, you can think anything you want, but can you at least know who the right party is for you? All right, so this is kind of hard to see, but so I asked, do you support drug testing welfare recipients? 71% said yes, they do, and only 18% of my survey said no. So everyone's in favor of drug testing welfare recipients. Which party handles it best? We had 22.9 said Republicans, 18. I won't read all the percentages, but voting government support for paying for health insurance. So does that mean, do you support any government program paying for health insurance? And he said, 61.9% said yes, 24.8% said no. Do you support same-sex marriage? 59% said yes, 29.9% said no. Do you support new sources of energy or production of existing energy? And what I'm asking there is, I'm asking, do you, the new production, renewable energy, or would you rather have the United States spend, efforts in trying to improve the production of existing sources of energy? And so 65% said they would preferred new energy and putting our resources, U.S. Resources into production of new energy, and 22.7% said we need to put our energy and efforts into producing, better producing existing sources of energy. And then finally, support for more or less spending on food stamps. So, do you think we spend more or less? And what we found here is only about 20% said we should spend more, 42% said less, and then we had lots of people. And then there was a good 32.9% said, let's just keep it the same. So here's what people said, and in this case, I'm not judging them. You say anything you want. Okay. So who can correctly connect their opinion to the right political party? All right. So when it came to drug testing welfare recipients, we have, this is the percentage making incorrect connections. So 32.5% of the people, no matter which they answered, I'm not telling you which way they answered. It doesn't matter which way they answered. I don't care about that. I just want to, can you connect it to the right party? Nope, almost a third could not connect it to the right party. Government health insurance subsidies, only 20%. So 1 in 5 people could not connect it to the right party. Same-sex marriage, this one people do really well. Same-sex marriage does very well. People seem to understand what's going on with same-sex marriage in politics better than these other issues. But still, nearly 13% of people could not correctly connect their opinion about same-sex marriage and the party that seems to support that opinion the most. U.S. energy production, 30% of people could not connect it to the right party. And then spending on food stamps, 25.8% could not connect it to the right party. So to me, you could make an argument, that's not that many. It's always a majority that get it right. Okay, that's great. There's a way to sell this as well, so that's not bad. But most people get it right, or most of the time it's more than 2/3 people get it right. But I think we need more than 2/3 of people that can do this very basic thing. I don't think there's anything easier you should be able to do as a democratic citizen. So, what did personality have to say about this? And what I'm doing here, don't worry about the numbers. Why I'm showing you this is because I want you to see the relative importance of one's personality compared to other commonly pointed to variables. So when it comes to politics, do you think partisanship matters? Is it important? No one's denying that, right? So everyone thinks partisanship matters, right? Does political knowledge matter? Yeah, everyone knows that political knowledge matters. Do you think someone's ideology matters? Yeah, we know people's ideology matters. Do you think people's religious beliefs matter? Yeah, people's religious beliefs. So these are things that people point to all the time, and even occasionally in those in-depth discussions you might accidentally see happen on television news. Occasionally these are things that people will point to. And so no one points to personality. And so what I'm doing here is I'm showing the relative effect, that personality actually, the size of its effect, is almost always right among those very common variables, the things that people always point to. So if you look at, when it comes to drug testing welfare recipients, the effect of the big 5 personality traits would be a 16.4. These are all on the same scale, that's why we can compare them. And you look at that, the only thing that was more important when it came to people's ability to connect their drug testing welfare recipients' attitudes to the right party was political knowledge and partisanship. Ideology was about the same, and religion didn't matter even less. Healthcare subsidies, now partisanship mattered a lot, but that's the only one. Otherwise, personality is just as important as political knowledge, more important than ideology and religion. When it comes to same-sex marriage, personality, one's personality is actually higher than all of these. Not by a lot, partisanship, shockingly, partisanship seems to be the most consistent, important driver of these things. But again, personality, something no one ever talks about, is just nearly the size of the effect is nearly identical to these very common variables. U.S. energy policy, this one personally wasn't as big a driver here. Political knowledge and partisanship were the biggest drivers. But again, down here, the second most important thing when it came to driving your opinion, your ability to connect your food stamp opinion to the right party was personality. The only thing more important was political knowledge. And so this is my, where I really try to make an argument that, look, personality matters, and it matters in relation, in size of its effect on people's attitudes and ability to do some very basic democratic competency type things is never talked about. And so it never yet to reach Fox News or MSNBC. I don't anyone seen a story where we're talking about people's personality and politics. I've not seen it. So it's not reached that, but partisanship, it's all the time. So personality matters is my argument here. All right, I have a little bit of time here, running out of time actually, but this is where I get a little controversial. Because I use the word hypocrisy, and I've had lots of people read this, and even before I published it, the people recoiled at the word hypocrisy. It's not, generally you don't want to be called a hypocrite, right? I don't want to be called one, so it's kind of a pejorative, but I stuck with it. Why? Because I like to be controversial, I guess, I don't know. So democratic hypocrisy, the idea here I'm getting, is that I support policies that help me, but I don't support policies that help anyone else. And so let's say, okay, you're a hypocrite. This is what I would say. And so, so what I'm going to get at here are what are known as, hidden state public policies, or, the hidden welfare state. All these public policies that the United States engages in that cost hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars each year that we don't really think about as welfare. They don't even think about it as public policy. And these are almost all worked through tax exemptions, or as tax expenditures. And what that means is that instead of collecting the money and then collecting all the taxes and then saying you qualified for it, here's a check, we say, well, just don't send us this much. You just keep that before sending in your money. So a tax exemption. Now, as far as bookkeeping goes and the effect on our deficit and debt, it doesn't matter. There's no difference between tax expenditure pre or post actually collecting the money. And so things like a home mortgage deduction. So I own a home, and what do I claim every year? I claim a deduction based on the interest I pay. What does that cost? Well, what it means is that I pay less tax. My tax rate goes down a little bit because I don't pay. I get that money taken off. And what does that cost the U.S. Treasury every year? Well, as of 2015, it cost around $74.8 billion. Various types of IRAs, so savings accounts associated with employment. Well, those are, they come before tax now. And the reason why it actually costs is because later, oftentimes, we take that money out and we could pay taxes on it. But because we're in a lower tax bracket, almost always, after we've graduated into life post-working, after we retired, we're in a lower tax bracket, so we pay less. And so, the estimate is that it costs about $19.5 billion a year. Social Security, again, the same kind of idea here, costs $39.3 billion. Tax exclusion for employer health care contributions, this is a massive one, right? So I'll just mention when I get my tax-free health care plan, that cost the U.S. Treasury $150.6 billion in 2016. A lot of money. Medicare exclusions cost about $33.2 billion. It says, Medicare costs, the cost of Medicare is $642 billion. And this is just a portion that's associated with it, comes with some various ways that we might pay less tax on Medicare than we would otherwise. But, and then just for reference, here's a traditional, what we traditionally think about as welfare, is food stamps here. And what does that cost? That cost, in 2015, $69.6 billion. So, not even close, right, to this one, but, maybe I get all of these things. And not yet, hopefully someday I'll get all these things at some point if I last that long. So this is the idea here, the idea that there's a lot of public policies that happen in this country that aren't considered welfare, but they're public policies. They're public policies that are about distributing money. You get to pay it. I don't have any children. I don't get to claim any children as dependent, never in my life have I, but I pay higher taxes than a person who has kids. And so that's a benefit. I have a problem with it. Okay, that's how it works. But it's still a benefit. It's a benefit for people who have kids. So, descriptive statistics, and this is just, if you look at my survey, what I had here is about almost 40% of people paying, were paying for a mortgage. About 48% said they had some type of 401k or IRA. 84.96% said they had health insurance. I asked also, people, do you get help paying for health insurance? Right, as I already said, almost everyone does get some form of help, and only 22.74% said they get some type of help paying for health insurance. Why? Because people don't typically think about their employer-provided health insurance, which is the most common way people get health insurance, as being some type of help from government. Do you support programs to help pay for health insurance? 61.9 said they did. And so then I got into more detail about this health insurance, where you get it from. So about 50% of people said they get their health insurance from an employer, Medicare being the second largest source of people's health insurance. So that's what the data looks like, all right? So now, where's the hypocrisy? So, measuring hypocrisy. So what I do is say, people who benefited from, the mortgage and or retirement program tax deductions, those people who say we should spend less on welfare. So they're getting a massive benefit, draws down the U.S. Treasury by a substantial amount, and so, spend less. So I want to spend, so 32.15% of those people getting, benefiting from the mortgage and or retirement programs say that they, would spend less on welfare. So that's the person I'm saying I'm calling for a hypocrite. You're benefiting from a government program, but you don't want other people to benefit from it. Spend less on food stamps, saying 27%. Health insurance, this is what I spent a lot of time on in this chapter. And so against programs that pay for health insurance. So I get health insurance, and I'm against any program that would help people pay for health insurance. 21% of people said that. And so the big one is here, I have health insurance, but I don't think I get help paying for it. So, this is kind of the incorrect story again here for people. And so now what was the driver of this? Well, it seems like people's conscientiousness is the one variable that popped all the time was conscientiousness. And what it meant is the higher, more conscientious individual you are, the more likely you are to be a policy hypocrite in this area. So it's like, so that's not good. Conscientiousness seems to be a big driver. It's the only variable that just stood up over and over and over again as a predictor of whether or not someone's going to be a policy hypocrite. So that was fascinating to me. And I'm like, all right, well, good. I am running out of time, so I will try to go through this. And I looked a little bit deeper into this. And what's fascinating about conscientiousness is that it drives both hypocrisy, but it also causes you to be more ignorant about this fact. So the effect of conscientiousness is multi-pronged, or it's mediated by ignorance, meaning that conscientiousness has a direct effect on whether or not you're a hypocrite, and it has an indirect effect through ignorance. It causes you to be more ignorant, and of course people who are more ignorant of whether or not they're getting help are more hypocritical about it. So the effect of conscientiousness is quite strong in this case, and it's a fascinating result, that I spent some time kind of digging into. Now the question of, well, what do you do about it? Well, that I don't have a strong answer, but I will just finish up and say, thank you for listening to my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions that you might have.
If personality matters, conscientiousness and all that sort of thing, and it matters how people view their political outlook, what's the application of that information? Why does it matter? What can people do to use that knowledge to manipulate votes or whatever?
Okay, so I'm going to ask to repeat the question so for people on YouTube. So if personality matters, what can we do with that information? So so you've demonstrated. So what? That's kind of a good question, right? So that's fine, perfectly reasonable question. Well, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, my idea and why I spent the last chapter talking about how I might have to we might rebuild our democracy is, to me, I feel like we're still at the very first stages of we need to understand what really causes people's behavior so that we can design our political institutions based on how real people behave as opposed to the mythical ideal democratic citizen. So given that, given personality, there is research on, something as simple as, well, which type of people are most likely to run for office? extroverts are actually more likely to run for office. What do I find? Extroverts actually don't know a lot, are some of the people who perform the worst on some of these tests. And so now I think, well, we need to find a way to get people who are introverted involved, right? Because introverts do really well on this type of thing. And so what I would begin to look at is, okay, what kind of research can, how would we design our institutions such that we don't favor one type of personality versus another? And it seems like when it comes to running for office, it does favor one. So I don't have a concrete answer, but what I have is I think this is the beginning of what we need to do. And I don't claim that we know now because I did this, we understand everything about human behavior. But I think we need more research on this, not just personality, but other unconscious drivers. And then once we have a stronger understanding based in science of what drives people's behavior, then we think about, well, how do I modify our democratic system to account for real people? Because real people, not the the myth that exists in political philosophy. Yeah.
I was just wondering, you said you had 2 questions for each of the 5 big 5 personalities.
Right. Yeah.
What were you asking about in conscientiousness? Since there's many aspects that can go into conscientiousness, what 2?
So, so the question is, what does the actual measure of personality look like? And it's the 10-item personality inventory, and I'm not drawing a blank. I don't have it listed here. It's in my book, so I can't answer that right now. I'd have to look it up. But if you just Google 10-item personality inventory, you'll see what what's asked. But the whole point of the 10-item personality inventory is that it's small enough and short enough that I can put it into a survey and still have time to ask questions. Right, so one of my big limitations is, on a survey, what survey experts suggest is that you shouldn't have a survey longer than like 20 minutes. Once people keep going and going and going, it just decreases the quality of the responses. And so I got 20 minutes. What am I going to do? Well, I can't put in a 50 question inventory to get extroversion, another 51 for each one. Then I would have no more questions because they're talking about 20 minutes. You're talking about maybe 60, 70 questions, and so that's all I have. And so the 10-item personality inventory is used a lot in political science, but just because it's something that only takes 10 questions, and I can still things like still got to find out their personality or their partisanship, their ideology, their beliefs about these different issues, and so it's not the best measure by any stretches. It's noisy, but it's functional. Is ultimately why I chose that.
I have a comment and a question.
Mm-hmm.
My comment is that you do have many different personality types in government. They're often staff people, and that's where your introverts will be.
Right.
So they really are involved, and and I'm sure you do understand that they often drive the votes of the Congress people, so they really are quite involved. And my question is, what do you mean by quality of participation?
So when I say quality of participation, I would like to see 100% of people be able to, whatever you believe, you can believe anything you want, but do you at least connect it to the right party? So when a person has whatever the subjective opinion is on any particular topic, and then chooses the wrong party, that's a problem. So, for example, when it came to, do you think that we should drug test welfare recipients, 71% said yes. And what the biggest problem was? It was liberals that were saying yes, and then saying the Democratic Party handles this the best. It's wrong. What's wrong with these liberals? They don't know what they're talking about. And so, this is, to me, is, quality participation is about doing that right. And, just, to me, it's the most basic thing a democracy depends on, is, you can have any opinion you want, but at least pick the right person, or the party right to follow. Other questions?
Did you have any particular type that came out more often than not, and how did you go about doing this that way was more, or as a randomly done as possible?
So, type, what do you mean? What do you mean?
Like personality, like the different personalities that you have.
So the question, was there one personality that seemed to show up more than others? The personalities. So when I did the survey, the personalities showed up at the same rate as would be predicted of the overall population. Importantly, this is the survey that I did was not a representative sample of the country. A representative sample would cost 10 times more, but the questions I asked don't require a representative sample because it's I'm not trying to tell you what proportion of the country is one personality or another. Anyway, so in order to control for the different personalities. Well, basically the models I set up, you just put the personality in there, and so they're all 5 are in there at any given time. And so, if I'm asking about extroversion, I'm controlling for the other 5. And so an individual will have a different number for each one of those 5 personalities, and based on how they answer. So, the model suggests that this would, those are controlled for, so there's not a problem. Even if there was some, one showed up more than another, the model would control for that, and the results would still be considered, consistent and not biased in some way. Other questions here?
What was the size of your sample and where was it located? I may have missed that earlier.
So the sample, it was 2,000, people, and it was an online survey, and therefore I do have, it's the entire U.S. So there's people from across the country, and the ages range from 18 to 75. I think I had someone who answered it. So there is a good mix, and so basically what I did was I had the survey condition on 2 variables, which was gender, to make sure there's a good proper representation of gender based on the U.S. population, and then race, ethnicity. So I had a good representation there, so that there's so there's 13% of the population is African American in the U.S. is 13% of my survey was African American.
Is it broken down into, location in the country at all? Do you
I have that information, yeah. So I knew which state everyone was from. I think I even had their zip code. So I had that information. There wasn't anything in the research to suggest the reasons why I should be concerned that the effects on answering these particular questions needs to control for a different part of the population. Once I control for again partisanship and ideology, political knowledge, religion, so I control for a whole bunch of things. I don't control necessarily for region or state that you're from.
Would it be too simplistic to say that when you listen to 30-second ads that candidates put out, that the candidates that are more conservative are going to pitch their ad to the conscientious personality, and that the candidates that tend to be a little left of center are going to pitch it to the agreeable personality?
So the question is is it reasonable to expect that political ads are perhaps pitched at specific types of personalities? And I think yeah, absolutely. To me, this is another form of research that hasn't really been done. In that there's something about the conscientious personality that is attracted to certain types of information from people, and whether they consciously do it or not, people when they're running and trying to attract that type of individual, they say those things. And it's not maybe even a conscious choice. They just kind of naturally know what's going to attract. So when a conscientious individual, kind of the people. I wake up every morning, I go to work, and I pay my bills, and I work hard throughout my life. Kind of argument is going to resonate really strongly. Whereas for someone who's open to experience things about trying new things, like or traveling the world and experiencing new life, that's going to attract the openness.
Or empathy, which would be the agreeable.
Right, yeah, agreeableness, yeah, exactly. People who are agreeable, they really dislike conflict. So if so they are turned off by shows or something like that are particularly conflictual, that kind of thing. So there's. I haven't seen it, but I would like to see research on whether, to the extent that this is a conscious choice or just by accident, right? Because we kind of know it intuitively, this kind of connection. Yeah.
So you said that some people rather don't end up voting for the right party. So without that education aspect that you said that we really don't need politics, how are we supposed to figure out what party is best for us to vote for?
Right, I don't want to criticize institutional education, right? So yeah, it's important. Keep going. Basically, my argument is that it doesn't appear that people are highly educated actually perform better in a lot of these tasks, right? So in all of my models, I control for education. So controlling for education, we still see this kind of issue. So what that means is that for a person who has a graduate degree, they still see the effect of conscientiousness, right? So on this, and so yeah, I'm all for education, and we need more of it, and that's great. I'm less sanguine about the possibility that if we have more education, that we're somehow going to become better democratic citizens. That's what I doubt is going to happen. Other questions? Yeah.
You said conscientiousness was most apt to get it wrong, more apt than the other 4 personality types.
For the hypocrisy question, right?
And the hypocrisy question.
Right.
How do the other 4 personality types rank?
Well, the reality is that most of them, so I measured this in a two-stage model where first it predicts whether or not you're a hypocrite at all, and then it counts the number of times you're a hypocrite. So not a single one of the other personality traits ever predicted the number of personality, how you would be more of a hypocrite. Only conscientiousness kind of popped, both as a predictor of whether you're going to be a hypocrite at all, and then how much of a hypocrite you are. So the other ones, what was it? I think it was extroversion popped as you're more likely to be one, but it didn't tell us how much. It just said yes or no. So it's that's why I just focused on conscientiousness, because it's the most clear signal that I got from my model. So it's really just the one that I'm confident in at this point. Any other questions? Yeah.
You said something about Medicare exclusions. What are those?
Medicare exclusion. Oh, I think that was just pointing out that the cost of Medicare was, I won't go back to it, but the cost of Medicare to the federal treasury that's associated with a program, a tax expenditure. I think that's what I was referring to there. So there's a portion of the federal treasury that goes down because we exclude it from taxes, right? And so it was like $30-some billion that are associated with that.
How do you philosophically deal with the fact that, okay, in your research and the way you've got it set up, there's a certain percentage of the people that are voting wrong or not consistent. But obviously those people themselves don't think that. I mean, how, are you trumping for a certain amount of rationality that just simply doesn't exist?
Well, so I've actually published another piece of research on the correct voting, but in this case, I wanted to make sure that because when I vote for a particular candidate, right, that's a set of issues that they're for. So it might be incorrect for me to pick one, right, and say, well, you voted for this candidate, and the other one was more for it, because I don't know what issues you all care about. I don't know what's the most important one. And so in this case, what I did, I tried to avoid that by just focusing. It wasn't really a vote for a candidate. It was just which party best represents this issue. So trying to be as clear as possible. And I picked issues where there was a really clear difference between the Democratic and Republican Party and how they handled each of these issues. So in this instance, it's just it's trying to make it as clean as possible, a connection. When it comes to drug testing welfare recipients, there's a clear difference between how Republicans and Democrats have handled it. And whatever you believe, can you at least pick the right one? Now, what I've done in other work is trying to get at this problem of how do I predict incorrect voting. And in that case, what I did was this was after 2012's election, so Romney and Obama. And what I did was I had 15 questions or 15 issues that they varied on that were considered the most important at the time. And I just gave them here's the 15 issues, and this candidate A and candidate B believe this set, and candidate B believes this set. Which candidate would you choose based just on the issues? So you could rank them. You could care about whatever you want. You can rank them. You could be a single issue voter. You find your issue, abortion, and boom, you pick that one. Or you could care about all of them equally, and you average across them and figure out which one. So I let people do whatever they want. And then I also asked who they actually voted for, right? And so then I measured incorrect voting by saying, okay, you voted for this person, but if you only saw the issues, you would have chose a different person, and that's where I said you did it incorrectly. No matter how it was that you were combining all those different issues. In that case, I did find that about 20% of people voted for. But it's hard, and you got to be very careful on this. And so a lot of the research, I think, in this area comes off as, oh, you're just some out of touch, liberal professor judging everyone for doing things wrong. That's what I'm trying to. I don't want to have anything to do with that. I just want let people do what they want. And can you at least believe anything you want, but at least you connect it to the right party or right candidate. So, yeah.
Do you think any of this can be connected with? Democrats are supposed to be a little bit more compassionate and feeling what people feel, and Republicans are supposed to be more business people going for the solid facts and things like that. Do you think any people vote for the party they want to be associated with, or they feel like, I want to be a business person, I want to be, I want to be that kind of structured person, so I'll vote for this person?
Right, so this is a huge, fascinating, and really kind of recent over the last 10, 15 years about a research that are all about how it is that, basically, so liberal and conservative people, think and feel differently, and a lot of it coming from our unconscious, a lot of it coming from neuroscience and genetics, that are driving us to care more about one particular set of things or feelings than the other. And so there's this fact, to me it's fascinating, it's just still early, I think we need a good another 15 years of research on us to be confident in it, but what it's showing is that I think there is something that's different about us, our personality, but just different about us, how we grow up and what we develop and how we develop and the things we care about, right? So whether or not I say, a certain word, I'm appealing to the business, kind of aspect versus, caring kind of aspect, that is a difference between people that seems to come out of, perhaps, some part of it at least comes out of our genetics or, and how our brain develops over the course of our lives, and also, of course, how we're raised and, and that kind of thing. And so to me, this is probably, to me, I would argue that this is going to be the real answer, how we understand people, and when it comes to politics, and that a lot of this, who we are and how we relate to things, is not a choice. It's not one person's evil, the other person's not evil. It's none of that. It's that we come from completely different perspectives, and that those perspectives aren't chosen. It's something that essentially we become. We are. It's part of us. And it happens in our brain. Our brains work in fascinating ways, right? So when someone says the word Republican, or someone says the word Democrat, or Obama, or Trump, right? Or what our brains do is instantly, boom, it's faster than we can even be consciously aware of it. They're sending all kinds of bits of information to our head. And it's not random information. It's not all the information we know about these topics. It's a very biased set of information. Right? So we have these things, we tag it, affectively tag every bit of information we have about these things, and then it sends up all those, those biased set of information, right? So my thoughts about the Democratic Party are biased, and it happens because our brain does it automatically, right? The form consciousness. And so then when I start actually consciously thinking about it, what information am I, focused on? This biased set of information. Okay, so this is motivated reasoning, a whole area of research that's really fascinating. And so, why am I thinking the way I am? Because my brain did it. Not me, it's my brain. If there's actually a difference between those two things, but so I think this is where political science needs to be going, and when it comes to understanding people, and perhaps, hopefully, my thought is that we'll be able to make a better democracy, make a better government, make a better country, because we understand people even better. Am I running out of time here?
I think we have one or two more questions.
Okay, all right.
If nurturing is part of personality, not genetic, but nurturing is part.
Yep.
And we who will try to be good parents, try to raise children that are efficient, high achievers, responsible. Are we creating the culture for the conscientious personality and therefore training the next generation of political hypocrites?
That is one implication of the research. It's possible, right? And so, how do we combat that? Maybe it's we want to be less conscientious. I don't know. But see, one of the things I like about kind of challenging the conscientious world is because conscientious is almost always seen as a positive thing. Right, there's not hardly any context in which conscientious is ever seen bad. And so I found this, and I was like, oh, ha! I can challenge what people automatically think. And so in this one instance, it seems like we're not living up to it. And so now how we can affect that, I would probably prefer, not reduce the number of conscientious people, I would probably prefer, how do we make, to just help conscientious individuals, better see the world, is what I would probably look for.
I would think that someone who was, raised in a family that was extremely, in my opinion, might be tending towards Republican, and the conscientiousness, their children would tend to vote as their parents did. And I'm wondering, did you look at that as a factor of how did the parents vote?
Well, I don't have any type of measure that comes, about your child rearing or anything like that. But yeah, I mean, you're right. There's tons of research that shows there's a clear, strong connection. If I want to predict how a person's going to vote, just ask how their parents voted, or if they're going to vote at all, right? So, if you're going to participate, just find out if their parents did. They will, almost always following this. And if I want to know how they're going to vote, just find out how their parents voted. There's going to be a very strong correlation between those things. But in this instance, I didn't see any research that suggested that would how you were reared was necessarily going to have an effect on whether or not you're able to connect, your subjective opinion to the right party. I didn't see it, so I didn't control for that. Questions? All right.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
All right. Yeah, thank you very much. Just two very brief announcements. One is we should soon have the book on campus. So if you want to dig deeper into it, you please do so. And the other one is we have, of course, more events coming up. And so just to announce, the next one is Monday, February 26th. Here, Dr. Jean-Blaise Samou, assistant professor of French, will give a talk on slave trade in Libya and what the implications are for U.S. foreign policy at 4:30 here in Little Theater. So, thank you again for coming.
It like won't let me stop.